refractory period. Okay, so this is just talking about conduction, okay? So this is what we've already talked about. You start at the SA node, right? And then the SA node basically is under sympathetic control, all right? That's the pacemaker of the heart, located in the right atrium. And then you go from the SA node, then we know we go to the AV node, then the Purkinje fibers, which we said the Purkinje fibers are the fastest part of the pathway. So if you look down here, you can see the Purkinje fibers in terms of the speed. You see how it's like 2 to 4? And then if you look at the AV node, look at it at 0.02 to 0.05, right? So that's how you can see the fastest versus the slowest, okay? Now we keep moving, and you don't need to know about this. Oh, let me back up. So you remember the other day, we don't need to know the number. No. Well, there's one number you need to know, but I'll show you when we get there. But it's dealing with the PR intervals, okay? So you remember when we talked about the muscles, and I was telling you all about the intercalated disc and the gap junctions? Y'all remember that last time? We talked about that in the last, good. So this right here, when we say about the intercalated disc and these gap junctions, this is just how the electrical impulses passes through the heart, okay? So that you can depolarize the tissues. All right, that's all that's saying. Okay, let's keep going. So AV node is the slowest. We can skip that. All right, we can skip that. And I'm only going to pull out things that I think is important. Okay. And we'll get to the part that I want to see, and it's coming, not there. Okay. All right, so EKGs, right? So you've heard of the different waves like P, Q, R, S, and T, right? Has everybody heard of those waves before? Yes, good. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the way we look at this is that first you have your P wave, okay? The P wave is when your atria are depolarizing. Right, this is your EKG, that's right. So your P wave is the atria depolarizing. Now, what is the ion, ION, what is the ion responsible for that atrial depolarization? Good, Erica. Good, Amira. Good, Kayla. Pocket. That's good. Calcium. Everybody understand that? So you remember calcium? No. Well, we just mentioned it earlier. We just said that a couple slides ago. Is that calcium is responsible for atrial depolarization. Sodium is responsible for ventricle depolarization. Okay? Right. Okay, good. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So the P wave is when the P wave is shown, that means that the atria are depolarizing, okay? All right, let's keep going. Now, when let's skip this, the QRS. When your QRS is shown, that means that the ventricles are depolarizing. Everybody see that? Okay, now let's keep looking. But guess what? What about the T wave? The T wave is when the ventricles are repolarizing. I know what you're saying, but wait a minute, Dr. Sutton, what about the atria? I don't see the atria repolarizing. Does anybody know when the atria repolarize? Anybody know? Well, guess what? You ready? The atria repolarize during the QRS. You can't see it because it's hidden in the QRS complex. So atrial repolarization happens during the QRS complex, but the QRS complex is specifically for ventricle depolarization. Okay, so your atria repolarization is hidden in that. Does that make sense? Okay, so far so good. All right. Now let's talk about this next thing. So we have this thing called the PR interval. Okay, so you see this thing right here? I'm gonna circle it. You see where it says PR interval right there? PR interval. That's from your P to your R. When we start to talk about the PR intervals, that helps us to understand something called heart blocks. Now, Amira was asking, do you have to remember any of the numbers? The only thing that I've ever seen them ask about, or even somebody said that they've asked about, was the normal PR interval, okay? The normal PR interval is between 0.12 and 0.21 seconds. Now, somebody says, well, how in the world am I going to remember that? I said, well, if you can remember 0.12 and you just turn it backwards, then you'll know the range, 0.12 to 0.21. Does everybody see that? Okay, good. Okay. So that is how you look at your PR interval, okay? Now, when you talk about the PR interval, what is the significance of it? Does anybody know? Well, SA node, okay, something about heart block. Yeah, definitely dealing with heart block. So the whole thing with the PR interval is basically one, the P wave is atrial depolarization, correct? That's when the atria depolarize, right? The QRS is when the ventricles depolarize. So between that PR interval, you've gotten the atria depolarizing and the ventricles starting to depolarize as well. So it makes sense that if something happens between that would be a problem. Would you agree? All right. So let's talk about these things called heart blocks. Okay? Heart blocks. So you got first degree, second degree, and third degree heart blocks. And the best way, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. But the best way to explain it is like this. All right. So the first one is called the first degree heart block. First degree heart block. And let me skip to the part where I want to show you. Okay. Hold on. That's not it. Don't worry about this. You don't have to read this. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to tell you a story, and then once you hear the story, I want you to look at the science behind it, okay? Normal, and this is about a husband and his wife, okay? So when they first got married, we call this the honeymoon phase. This is your normal heart rhythm. They just got married. It's their normal honeymoon phase. Now, of course, when they just got married, they're in love with each other and they're always together. Now, the husband is P, the wife is R. Everybody with me so far? Okay. All right, so far so good. Now, honeymoon phase, normal heart rhythm, they're together. Well, guess what? So the first degree heart block, the P, and we're going to call the wife the Q. Well, we'll just call it QRS, right? Because just remember Q for the wife. Well, in first degree heart block, the husband, the P, and the QRS are getting irritated with each other. Now, they still are in a relationship, but now they're keeping their distance for right now. Okay, let's see if that makes sense. So they're still together, but they're keeping their distance. That's first degree. So that means you're going to have a longer PR interval in a first degree heart block. Does that make sense? Everybody with me so far? Karina says yes. Pedro, yes. Okay, good. Perfect. Let's go to the next thing. Well, something happened. So now that takes us to a second degree heart block. Now in second degree heart blocks, you have two types. You have the Mobitz 1 and the Mobitz 2. Okay, those are the two types. Now, in the second degree heart block, type 1, is that the husband, P, and his wife, QRS, are now getting into this cycle of breaking up and then getting back together. They're like breaking up and then they're getting back together, right? They get together, they start fighting, and they keep their distance, and then they break up again. Wow. So they get together, they start arguing, they keep their distance, and then they break up again. That's type 1. So look at this one. Type 1 means that when you break up, you drop a beat. So one of the beats are dropped in the second degree heart block. But in Mobitz 1, they're going to have what we call a variable PR interval. Okay? Well, how's that different from type 2? Well, type 2 is basically they've decided to get back together. However, P is still not happy and has decided to go out every night or two and fool around on QRS, on the R. Now, let's think about this. In type 2, there is no change in the PR, except now, instead of the PR, since there's no change, it's still going to be a drop beat. Okay, does everybody follow that? So Mobitz type 1, the PR interval changes, right? They break up, they get back together, they break up, they get back together, right? But anytime they break up, that's a drop beat. Does everybody understand that? Well, you get to number 3, here's the problem. So because P keeps going out and keeps cheating, finally QRS gets fed up, right? And has filed for divorce. And now they are completely separated. So that means that there's no pattern between the P and the QRS interval anymore. Because normally you're supposed to have a P followed by a QRS, right? Everybody follow me? But now in the third degree, there's the P and the QRS may not be going simultaneously. They're totally off. So that means that the atria and ventricles can start beating independently, which is a problem. Does everybody understand that? So those are your 3 heart blocks. Any questions on that? Everybody got it? Make sense? All right. Okay, so pretty much in terms of electrical conductivity, that's all you need to know about electrical conductivity of the heart. Okay, everybody got that? So let me ask you a question. Let me ask you another question, okay? Let's say, for instance, right? Let's say we had something like, here's a one they can give you. Patient comes in with a knife wound to the abdomen and has increased hemorrhage. I forget how to spell this. You all know what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. Here's my question. Number 1, what's going to happen to